It was absolutely incredible. It felt like all the chains and all the darkness had been stripped away, I guess, for the first time in decades.
Dave Pounds says he remembers the moment his world changed forever.
It was quite remarkable.
It was after just one therapy treatment with MDMA.
And I remember thinking how everything seemed brighter and warmer, and that was fantastic.
Better known as the party drug ecstasy, E or Molly, it's often called the love drug, popular at raves and festivals, but still considered a Schedule I illegal drug in the US, outlawed in the 70s, even for medical use.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
But some researchers never stopped believing in the power of the love drug and continued to study MDMA for decades in hopes to prove it could have real medical benefits and was not just a way to get high. For Dave, he says a groundbreaking research trial with MDMA helped him come face to face with one of the most painful memories of his past.
What was that moment for you that caused this trauma that you got stuck in?
I was 12, and it was during the weeks. Mum was working at a restaurant, and Dad, who's a professor of X-ray astronomy, was giving a lecture. Mum got a lift home from the restaurant from a colleague, and she invited him in for a cup of tea.
He tells us his story, how he heard his mother being murdered from his bedroom upstairs.
There were footsteps up the stairs, and my bedroom door was opened, and all I could hear was panicky breathing, you know, really fast, panicky breathing. I carried on pretending to be asleep. He left and went back downstairs, and that's the last thing I heard for probably about an hour and a half, and I hadn't moved, I hadn't even blinked. I was frozen, petrified with fear.
It was only when his father came home from work that Dave says he walked downstairs, saw what had happened to his mother.
She'd been stabbed many, many times, as I remember. Blood was everywhere, and she'd been raped. And you know, so the last image of my mum was that.
For years, he buried the memory.
I remember being in bed for months at night, sort of crying myself to sleep, but apart from that, it wasn't discussed, and we just got on with it.
Dave says he tried to cope and seek help, but as he got older, things only got worse.
And I just started drinking more and more and ended up binges for weeks and weeks.
It wasn't until he says he hit rock bottom in 2019 that he found psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And that's when Dr. Ben Sessa entered his life.
Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
Dr. Sessa was leading an MDMA-assisted therapy trial in the United Kingdom.
This medicine that allows you to go to forbidden, avoidant, painful thoughts.
Now, Sessa's the chief medical officer at Awaken Life Sciences, the UK's first provider of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy available to the public.
What is it like to look up there and see that side?
It's so validating and gratifying after years of this being a kind of weird fringe subject. This is no longer that. This is cutting-edge neuroscience, this is cutting-edge medicine, this is the future of psychiatry.
But what is psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy? It's a treatment that uses traditional talk therapy paired with hallucinogenic drugs, like psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, LSD, ketamine, and MDMA, also known as ecstasy. Researchers believe these drugs, under the close watch of trained doctors and therapists, may be able to alter a patient's state of mind to possibly help them face the root causes of trauma. They found that MDMA acts as a central nervous system stimulant, increasing chemicals like serotonin and oxytocin in the brain, often called happy or love chemicals, while also decreasing activity in the amygdala, the part of the brain that processes fear.
So what we're doing is we're cleverly combining these two very disparate fields, psychopharmacology and psychotherapy, which are usually at total opposite ends of the spectrum. We're combining them into a single intervention with drug-assisted psychotherapy.
Dave says he remembers his first night of MDMA therapy vividly.
And I felt really warm and calm, really super sharp, not intoxicated at all, nothing like drinking alcohol. And I just felt safe. Quite quickly, an image came to mind, which was of me in my bedroom the night of the murder. But instead of the bedroom being dark, it was warmly lit. I was sat up in my bed in my pyjamas, and the murderer was at the end of my bed. And I just very calmly looked at him and said, I'm pretty sure I know what you've done downstairs, and I'm pretty sure you could kill me. But I want you to know that I'm not frightened of you anymore. Even more bizarrely, Mum came into the room. Next image was all three of us having a hug. I mean, I don't know where that's come from, but it was almost like I was making peace with the whole event.
This is why people don't progress in typical therapy or with typical medications so well, because they can only get so far with their therapy, and they eventually hit this brick wall where it's like, I'll talk about anything, but I ain't talking about that. And then with the MDMA on board, I think of it, Dave, as like a sort of life jacket or bulletproof vest to wear into battle with your trauma, because it just, in some ways it's not that magical. It simply allows you to do the psychotherapy that you should have done decades ago. Did it sort of feel like that? You could finally had permission to go there and talk about those memories?
Yeah, and whether that was conscious or subconscious, I'm not sure.
Currently, Awaken offers therapy with ketamine, which is legal in the UK. But Dr. Sessa is pushing for the legalization of more psychedelics.
When you get your leg mended, it's mended, you're discharged, you never see them again. We don't tend to do that in psychiatry. Why not? Well, I think we can, and I think psychedelics offer us that opportunity.
According to the World Health Organization, there's been a 13% rise in mental health conditions and substance use disorders in the last decade worldwide. In the United States, the results from 2 phase 3 90-patient MDMA-assisted therapy clinical trials conducted by the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies were recently published. That group is in the process of seeking full FDA approval for MDMA-assisted therapy as a new prescription treatment for PTSD.
We found a statistically very persuasive difference between MDMA and placebo. And the placebo group actually also got the therapy. So it's not just comparing to a sugar pill, it's comparing to psychotherapy together with a sugar pill.
The results of these studies found 67% of people who had MDMA-assisted therapy no longer qualified for a PTSD diagnosis after 3 sessions, compared to only 32% of people who got traditional talk therapy alone. And 88% of the people with MDMA-assisted therapy had clinically meaningful reductions in PTSD symptoms.
We're hopeful that by the end of 2023 that we'll be able to start offering this treatment in clinics in several locations in the US.
But some experts caution that this trial was relatively small, reminding people MDMA is not a cure-all drug. During treatments, it must be used in a controlled setting.
It's important that, as this study is showing, that MDMA was given in the setting of therapy, and that the role that it plays is really in facilitating a therapy that's very productive for the person, as opposed to being a magic pill that you take and suddenly all your problems go away.
For Dr. Sessa, he says the biggest hurdle now is public perception.
I'm going to give the war on drugs a massive amount of credit for one thing, for very, very successfully poisoning the minds of 50 years worth of intelligent, erudite people to have an instinctive knee-jerk reaction that if a drug is used recreationally, it is therefore dangerous and useless and addictive and couldn't have any possible positive benefits. That is just wrong. They are not useless, they are extremely useful, they are extremely safe, and they could be superb medicines for patients.
How do you think we make that flip from having people think about MDMA as more than a party drug?
Oh, such a big question, such a good question. I mean, so many ways. I mean, the way that I'm doing it is through the science and the medicine and the collecting the data and the demonstrating the safety and efficacy of these tools. And then comparing and contrasting that with our traditional treatments in psychiatry, which are failing our patients in so many cases.
While the research and debate continues, Dave says this is the best he's felt since he was 12. What's the world like for you now?
Well, I think I feel at the moment stronger and calmer and probably having more hope about the future than I've had for decades. I don't feel as though I could class myself as being cured, But, you know, if something does trigger the anxiety, it tends to feel a lot less strong, and I tend to recover more quickly. So, you know, in that sense, I'm certainly more resilient.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic, really fantastic.